Hello and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today is Lauren Huffmaster. And since 2015, Lauren has been in treatment for breast cancer. She's a certified cancer coach and the founder of Adventure Therapy Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting the emotional healing of cancer survivors. She hosts the podcast Adventures with Scars, authored the book Cancering, Exploring the Seasons of Emotional Healing, and co-created the children's book, The Adventure Jar. Lauren is widely recognized for her work addressing the emotional side effects of cancer, and her journey continues to inspire and transform the cancer experience of others. So welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to dive into this because I've talked with several different people on this podcast, and we've kind of touched on the emotional piece of cancer. I've even done a solo episode on survivorship and like what happens at the end of active treatment for so many people that they, the emotional piece of all of that. And I just don't think that it is heralded enough. And we focus so much on the physical piece of cancer, and this kind of goes by the wayside. So I'm really excited to dive into all of this with you today.
Definitely so.
All right. So let's kind of start. Let's start back in 2015. Tell us a little bit about your diagnosis, how you were diagnosed, what was going on in your life back then.
So in 2015, I was a teacher and I had 3 girls who were 2, 4, and 6. And so I was a very busy person, a very busy mom with preschoolers running around my house and trying to manage school as well, teaching. And so, but I found a lump and I was 35. So I didn't sort of qualify for a mammogram at that time. So I really didn't know how to proceed. And so I just watched the lump for a while. And then after a few months, it started to grow and change. And at that point, I knew it wasn't good. At that point, I'd been like pregnant or nursing for so long. I really didn't know what was going on. Like maybe it was just some kind of, I don't know.
It's like, what is normal for my boobs, right?
My breasts had been changing. Who knew what this change was, right? I was 35. There's no way cancer was in my mind. So when it started changing, my husband absolutely insisted I go to the doctor. And as people probably remember, everything went very quickly from there. Within a few days, I had a pour. Within a day or two of that, I was starting treatment. So originally I was diagnosed stage 3. And we did all the typical treatments. We did chemo, I did a double mastectomy, and then we did radiation.
Okay. So was the stage 3 based on the size of the lump, or did they find lymph node involvement?
There was lymph node involvement as well.
Okay. And so you had all the treatments for stage 3 cancer. And then at what point did you find out it was metastatic?
Yeah. So after I had gone through everything that was prescribed, the doctors encouraged me to have an oophorectomy, which is to take out my ovaries. And so I went in for a scan just to make sure, the doctor had clear margins or whatever. And she knew what she was getting into, I guess. And on that scan, so it was the last treatment of my stage 3 plan. And on that scan, they saw that it had already spread to my bones. So I wasn't done with those first year and a half, 2 years of stage 3 treatment when I was already diagnosed stage 4. And as you can imagine, I had done everything. I had done all the most extreme, I did everything that asked me.
I did everything right. Why?
Me, like I was still young. This was devastating news. Absolutely.
Okay. And now, did the treatment change once that happened? Because breast cancer treatment, the chemo, radiation, all of that is kind of, I don't want to say it's the same, but it's kind of a similar protocol. So how did your treatments change at that point?
Yeah, stage 4 is very different in the treatments. And if they had found it stage 4, if they had done a PET scan at the beginning, we might have seen that at the beginning.
So did they think that it was stage 4 when you were initially diagnosed? They just didn't look for it?
The doctor said my bones had been seeded, is what they call it. And so which meant that it was growing. We just probably didn't see it on a scanned that early because it was too young, too little. But so stage 4 is very different. Today, a lot of women diagnosed with stage 4 start off with a pill, and that pill is a kind of chemo, but it has almost none of the side effects we expect from a chemo. It's much milder. And so I started a brand new med at the time. It had just been approved a few months before, and I started Kisqali, and it was a effective med for me for 5 years. I actually had 3 years of no evidence of disease during that time, and I took the pill at home, so it was no infusion. I had a lot of strength. I did a lot of amazing things. I hiked across Spain one summer. Like, I did amazing things
Wow.
during that time. And and that treatment was great. But with stage 4, the problem is your cancer will mutate. So as soon as it realizes it's being suppressed, it will start to become something different. So after about 5 years of treatment, they found out that my cancer was growing and that it switched to triple negative. So
Oh, goodness.
about a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we found that out, that I was triple negative. And so I went back to chemo. I went to paclitaxel, which is the Taxol, and I did it once every 3 weeks, and I did that for 20 months. So in the original, I think you usually get Taxol for like,
12
a
weeks.
couple of months, right? 2 or 3 months. And I did it for 20 months. And paclitaxel is like a little harsher version as well. So it was a very, very long time on chemo. And I got very weak, as you might imagine. But I stopped that in March, and I've just started a new med in HER2. So now I'm on a new med, feeling much stronger, not nearly the side effects of paclitaxel. And right now, it looks like my cancer is shrinking and disappearing. So that's wonderful.
Yay, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Wow. So it's been quite the roller coaster ride for you
Absolutely.
these
Yeah.
last 8 years.
Mhm.
And is that the thing kind of about metastatic cancer, is that, you just kind of keep moving kind of from one medication to another as the effectiveness decreases?
Absolutely. Every med sort of has a shelf life. You expect it to last 18 months, you expect it to last 8 months. And so you start the med, and first of all, you spend the first 2 months figuring out if it's working. But once it's working, you stay on it absolutely as long as possible, because every time you leave that treatment, you can never go back. Your cancer knows that and will have a way to get around it. So, but as metastatic, your cancer is always shifting and changing. So I was estrogen positive at the beginning, then it went to triple negative, then it had HER2 low. So I'm still triple negative, but I have like a 0.1 or a +1 of HER2, which is very low. And so you're just always playing a game. You're trying to see how long you can stay on a treatment, but your time is limited. The cancer will mutate. It literally changes the shape of its cells to block those treatments. So, and so that's why we have to change treatments over time.
I did not know that. I did not know how smart cancer actually is.
It's very smart. Yeah.
That is insane. Okay, so kind of take us into, so you became a certified cancer coach, and you do a lot with the emotional piece of cancer. How did you kind of move into that realm? I know you were a teacher before, so you had some of that, but how did you kind of move into what you're doing today?
Yeah. When I was diagnosed stage 4, I realized this was the rest of my life. And I wanted to make sure, especially for the sake of my children, that they knew that you can do powerful things even in bad circumstances, and you could show up for others even when you're weak. And so I started looking for ways to show up for others and to make a difference with this part of my story. And I started Adventure Therapy Foundation as my first point of action. And at the beginning, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to give away, but I started out with retreats. We gave free vacations away. And I spent a lot of time on the phone listening to people before and after the retreats. So, what I started doing at the beginning was just showing up for people, being a friend, being someone they could call. And I listened to hours and hours and hours of people talking and telling me their story. And what happened over that course of time was I found rhythms and patterns. I could tell from what they were saying, where they were in their healing journey. And I started sort of taking notes that if the first year, this is how you feel, and the second year, this is how you feel after treatment, and these rhythms within the experience of cancer. And from those stories, from those moments of just showing up for people and listening to them, I started to create this philosophy I could begin to predict, oh, this is where they are and this is what they need to move forward. And I could coach them through that. And then I became a cancer coach. But I wanted to learn about this emotional healing process, because in years past, especially with stage 4, we weren't living long enough to emotionally recover from cancer.
True.
And now we are. I'm living 10 years and people are going to live longer than that. And so we have a lot of life to live. And we're not going to live well if we're just staying in that trauma moment. And yet there's no one really to guide us forward either. So I needed to create a path where people could see, this is where you are, but look at all these steps forward you could take, even though this first part feels absolutely devastating. And so that's what I started creating through lots of tools. We talk about on my podcast. The book Cancering outlines this whole philosophy. And then, of course, a lot of the trainings we do, the classes we do through Adventure Therapy are about teaching people the emotional side effects of cancer.
And I was looking on your website, and so I want to kind of dive into that, because you have that, like, the 3 big emotional side effects are fear, isolation, and broken identity. So can you kind of break down a little bit of each one of those, and then maybe, a little tip on what you can do to, help to navigate through that?
Absolutely. Yeah, fear is something we can all understand. Even those not diagnosed with cancer. We went through COVID as a nation, and we could see all the fear that emerged in families and in all sorts of circumstances, not even related to COVID. So I think that as a nation, we can really understand how fear and disease goes together. Fear has its place, right? When you're first diagnosed, when you're going through treatments, it puts you on alert and you're paying attention to your body. It has its place. So the part of fear that we talk about is this culture of fear, this mental framework of fear where you're always expecting negative outcomes
Well, I think
because
just
of the
that
things.
word cancer
Yeah, absolutely.
instills fear in everyone, even though it's, so much more treatable and curable and, just manageable nowadays. You hear that word, and the first thing is, am I going to die? And I think probably 99% of people, when they get that diagnosis, it's the first thing that enters their mind.
You are 100% correct. And that is the point that I make. We've been taught to be afraid of cancer, to fear cancer. And just like you said, even though research and treatments and lifespan has gone up in a positive way, like exponentially in the last 5 or 10 years, our fear has not shifted. Our fear stays the same, which shows you that it has this irrational sort of hold on us because of how we've experienced it in the past and what we've been taught to think about it. And so the book really goes through and talks about how we separate like uncertainty and fear, because they're not the same thing. We will live in uncertainty, whether you have stage 1 cancer or stage 4, you're going to have uncertainty in your life because of its presence, but you don't have to have fear. They're 2 separate things. So that is fear. Isolation is, again, we could see it in COVID. When we are diagnosed with cancer, we really step out sort of the flow of life. Everyone else just keeps going to ball practice or showing up to work or going to the gym and doing all the things they used to do. But we stop and we stay home and we go through treatments by ourselves, and we show up at for surgery by ourselves. And we get out of touch, out of alignment with so much of who we were and all the people around us. And there was just a big article released called Cancer Ghosting, which really affirmed what I was talking about, this idea that people just ghost you after you're diagnosed. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to help you. So they just step away and let you go through it on your own. And so this idea of isolation in the cancer experience is becoming very, very common. And we're talking about it more, which is a wonderful thing.
So there was just a little side note for people who have kids old enough to remember the TV show Clifford, the Big Red Dog. There was one episode, it's probably the only episode that I really remember, is they started hanging out with this dog who only had 3 legs. And one of the dogs just didn't want to really be anywhere near him. And and the joke was, oh my gosh, maybe he has leg losing germs. And if I get too close, then I'm going to lose my leg too. And it was so profound in this little kids show of, I think in some ways people feel that way too, even though it's irrational. Like, oh my gosh, if I spend too much time, maybe it's catching and I don't need to be too close. I don't know if that's something that might be a thing too with the isolation.
Yeah, I think we definitely trigger things in other people, right? It's their own fears, their own insecurities. Who knows? Maybe they lost a mother or an aunt or someone along the way, and it's triggering these unresolved emotions. And so we as patients and survivors have no idea how we're impacting those around us, but we are, right? And so it often feels like we're just alone in the process. And so isolation is a big thing that our nonprofit works to resolve and minimize, is by showing up. I show up on social media. I say, hey friend, almost every day on social media, trying to just remind people you're not alone, because I understand what it feels like to be alone. But really, we are more connected than we could ever imagine because of these cancer rhythms in our life. We've been scarred the same way, as what I like to say. We've been scarred in the same ways, and so we can really understand each other. We just have to reach out and find one another. So
Whether it's stage
isolation,
1 or stage 4,
yeah.
whether it's breast or testicular or skin or whatever, that word cancer just, unites us all in a shared experience.
And you're exactly right. Every stage you emotionally respond the same, right? It doesn't matter if you're stage 4. Stage 4, you're going to stay in that cycle, that loop a little longer, because this is our ongoing life. But that initial scarring, that initial uncertainty and broken identity, that is the same in all of us. So that is something, yeah, exactly, we have in common. And it's not just me; it's my husband. He's having to go through the same questions, the same uncertainty as I am. And so that is just part of the story I like to tell, is we are connected, right? We just have to learn to have a conversation about what is connecting us.
I actually think my husband had a harder time with it than I did, just because it was mine, but I'm just like barreling through and I'm going to get through this and everything is going to be fine. And he's just kind of in the background going, oh my gosh, my wife might die and what am I going to do, kind of thing. So I think, and I try and bring on caregivers here as well to share their stories, because they are the unsung heroes. And I think that they really deserve to have a little bit of spotlight on them, because I can't even imagine how hard it is to take care of someone and to watch someone go through this and feel completely helpless.
Yeah, yeah. My husband said it's like a contrast. You give everything away. You do anything you can to help them, but you can't make anything go away. So you're like emptying yourself, but not fixing any kind of problem. And so it is this ongoing need. They want to men are fixers too, right?
Yes.
And so they cannot fix this for us. They cannot do it for us. They cannot lift the burden for us. So it's very difficult.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about fear and isolation. So let's talk a little bit about broken identity.
Yeah, broken identity is the one I think people have the hardest time identifying. I think we can all feel the pain point, but it's hard to know what is exactly happening. And I mentioned earlier, when you get diagnosed, you step away from your job, you step away from the activities that make life for us, right? Like I can't go to the grocery store for my kids maybe, and I can't go to the gym, I can't work out, I can't go climb a mountain, whatever I wanted to do. And so all these things that have been my identity, right? My hair, the way I look, the way I feel, these are all parts of my identity. Also, parts of my identity are what I expect in life, what I'm working toward, right? So if you're working toward retirement, or if you're working toward a big cruise in 5 years, or whatever you have in your mind, you're working toward being at your daughter's wedding, right? All of a sudden, these things come into question. Whether you're stage 1 or stage 4, there is, once you've had this sort of compromising moment, that question of uncertainty stays with you. So will I get my strength back? Will I have hair again? What will it look like? Will it be curly? Will it be gray? Will I be there for my daughter's wedding? How will I show up? How will I continue to be me if who I am and what I do is now questioned? I may not be able to be present for these parts of my life. And so what it really leaves us with is incompletion. I'm halfway to getting my daughter to, having a grandkid, or halfway to getting my daughter to through school, but I may not be there to see it to the end. And so there's all these pain points, and questions about our value, who we are, what's important to us. Now that things have come into question, where do I really want to invest my time? Who am I? And where do I implant myself from this point forward? So many people, I would say almost 100%, but not exactly 100%, want to do something different with their life, something more purposeful after their diagnosis. And that goes back to this reflection period of, what are my values? What's really actually important to me that I'm not willing to give up, right? And when you're young and you sort of just jump into life, you get the first job, you just get going, right? You're like, this thing leads to that thing, and that thing leads to the next, and you just get on this track, and you go forward. And it's not bad, but it's not always intentional either.
Right.
You just this friend comes into your life, and you guys start doing painting together or whatever, and you just walk step forward, and then all of a sudden cancer comes, and it really wipes everything clean, right? And what I call that is the void. And this is the hardest part of the experience of cancer, in my opinion. And that's the period right when treatment ends and before you start again. There's a season called the void, and it's when everything's been wiped clean. I talk about it as like a wildfire, like the fire has burned everything down. There's nothing but ash. And you have this big blank slate that is your life. And you have to decide what goes back into the picture of who you are. Not everything you're going to want to be there again. Not everything's going to work again. Maybe you can't, maybe you had like heart damage from chemo, or there's all these different things that might have happened to you. And so the person you were may not fit into the person you will be, but you don't exactly know who you will be yet. So you're mourning what was, and you don't yet know what is or what will be. And so there's this in-between space. And that is the moment of early survivorship. I think once you've found who you want to be and you've found your first steps and you're moving in that direction, that's when you really move into that thriving survivor space. But there's a sacred space in between. And honestly, it's the most important part for the healing of cancer emotionally, because you have to take time to grieve. You cannot grieve while you're in the middle of treatment. Right. You are doing too many physical things. You're following whatever the doctor says. You're not reflecting. It may feel like you are, but you're honestly not. It's not until everything comes to a stop that you have time to reflect on everything that was lost. I didn't get to show up for Christmas. I didn't get to go on my summer vacation. I didn't get to be there when my daughter sang her recital solo, right? And so you start reflecting on what was lost during treatment, and then you start realizing this could be lost again. This may not always be a part of my future. And so there's this deep grieving process that happens in this void. And it has to happen. It has to happen before we can truly move forward with a confidence, with purpose, right? And I think that that's the part that people miss. They want to jump straight from, I'm not sick anymore, right? Like, give me something to do. I want to go help somebody. I want to go do this. I want to go do that, right? And I know that feels good. We want to like, everybody took care of us. Now let me like balance the scales and go take care of a bunch of other people. But that's not really emotionally healthy. We need to stop. We need to reflect and grieve what has happened.
So from what you're saying, it feels like that the void it's, I don't want to say a double-edged sword, but it's like, it's very scary, and it can bring back that fear and that isolation and that broken identity. And it's also truly an opportunity to figure out, okay, how do I want the rest of my life to look? Whether that's a year, whether that's 30 years, or anything in between. And it's truly like a gift and an opportunity that you can make of it whatever you want. And you still have to go through the grieving process, which, as humans, we are so good at allowing ourselves to grieve. So I love that. Like, and like I said, I've talked with several people about that kind of depression that comes in once the end of active treatment happens. So I love that you have something to call it. Like that's fantastic. And that it's an opportunity for the rest of my life. And why don't our doctors tell us about this?
Yeah, everything you said is spot on. It is an opportunity. It is a gift, but we have to be willing to be uncomfortable for a little while to process what's happening. I've presented this philosophy at numerous conferences, and I told my husband, I haven't done my job unless three grown men have come up and cried to me, because we don't process our grief, right? Like, people will come up and they say, it's been 10 years since my diagnosis, but I still feel that pain every day because I never take the time to grieve it. And I say, yes, but today you can grieve it. You can start something new, because if we don't take this time and grieve it, the pain of cancer will follow us forward. If we do take the time and grieve and mourn and reevaluate who we are and who we want to be, then cancer becomes a catalyst and we can have post dramatic growth, right? And so we need to value and honor this time. And like you said, we have words to say. And our families, they'll say, now you can get back to being yourself, you can get back to the old you. And they do that with the best of intentions, because they want to see us happy and strong, right? Because that gives them this sort of the moment they can breathe a sigh of relief. And so for us to take another 6 months or something to say, like, I need more time to emotionally recover, it's going to be really hard for them to understand unless we have a vocabulary, unless we have this metaphor, this story that we can tell them, like, hey, this is what's happening to me right now. And for the sake of our future, I have to honor where I am emotionally right now. And so the book, one of my number one goals was just to give us a vocabulary so we can explain what's going on to those we love. So that invites them into our process, rather than like keeping them out because we just don't know what to tell them, how to explain what's going on to them.
Oh, I love that. And I think we also forget that, cancer is a loss. Like, we think of grief as losing a family member, losing a friend, like someone dying. But this is also truly a loss. It's the loss of who you once were. Like, nobody is ever, I don't want to say nobody because that's an absolute, but people are not going to be the same after a cancer diagnosis and treatment. And having that opportunity to grieve is so huge, and it is uncomfortable. And I've been in grief therapy for several years, dealing with the death of my parents. And, thank God I was in therapy already when my cancer was diagnosed. So that really helped. But, I didn't grieve for my dad for almost 20 years, because he died right before I got married. We had our wedding and then just started living our lives. And I never had the opportunity to grieve for him. And it was almost 20 years later. I had a friend who lost her son in Afghanistan. I had never even met her son. And I cried for 4 days. And I had no idea why. And I went and I talked to my pastor, and he's like, well, good. You're finally starting to grieve for your father. And I was like, what? That was 20 years ago, So it's going to come around, and your body's going to make sure that you have the opportunity to grieve. And it's so much better when you do it in due time versus waiting, until you bawl your eyes out for 4 days for somebody that you don't even know.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And all those years you're holding this burden inside, right? You're carrying this emotion.
Well, and
And
every year, like the anniversary of his death, like I was a basket case. Like, I couldn't do anything. I would cry all day long, like every single year, because I never followed the path. I want to say got over it, because I don't think you ever get over it. And I've learned that grief is something that kind of walks with you, versus I'm going to grieve and then I'm going to get past it. I don't know if you feel the same way. I just feel like grief is never gone. It's just how you learn to live with it and carry it with you.
yeah, for me, I think of it as like a string of lights almost. And every new grief that comes into my life, every new thing I mourn, there's this like screwing in of this new bulb. But when I do that, all the other pain points flicker, right? And if I've never addressed them, they're all going to burn and hurt me really badly. But if I've addressed them, I can feel them. I know that they're there, but I don't have to relive them in this new moment of grief, right? But what happens is we don't grieve. And so every time a new pain point, whether it's the anniversary or the smell or a dish or something like that, that reminds us of the person we've lost or the thing we've lost, we have that new trigger, and it gets screwed into this light string, and all of them burn and hurt so badly, right? Because we've never gone through and processed this pain. And so you're exactly right that we're going to carry the grief. If we give ourselves time in the beginning, it won't impact every decision we make for the rest of our lives, right? We won't always be hesitant or living in fear. We'll be able to find confidence to take bold action, to grow, to have this post-traumatic growth. If we spend the time, give it what it needs for us to mourn what's happened to us. And that is really my goal in life. If we can learn to grow through our difficult circumstances, then we're demonstrating it to everyone who's watching our story. We're demonstrating it to our kids and our loved ones and all of our friends. If instead we pretend like nothing happened, then our friends feel like they have to act like nothing happens every time they're hurting, right? And so by processing and honoring what's going on in our life, we are giving others the opportunity to do the same.
So I know grief is a very complicated thing, and I don't even know if you can answer this question, but is there something that people can do to just really learn to reflect or, figure out and maybe start this process of grief that they've been suppressing for so long, just like a first step to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, for me, I just see it as so layered, right? And we're always digging deeper to find where that root ends. And so for me, it's acknowledging that these triggers. So for the first few years, the biggest triggers were the holidays. I was diagnosed a week before Thanksgiving, and then I was diagnosed 3 days before Christmas. And so for me, the holidays were this huge trigger, and I would have a meltdown the week before Thanksgiving and all through Christmas, because everyone else, again, it's this isolation. I'm out of alignment with what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is moving into this joyous holiday whole season. And I am just reminded of everything I was lost, what the years where Christmas was stolen from me, the years Thanksgiving was stolen from me, but also just all the changes that started in that moment. It's like the smell of Christmas reminds me of my first chemos, right? Because it was like my first chemo was 2 days after Christmas. And so it's just this process of those triggers are where I start. I started with, why do I melt down here? Why does this smell hurt me? What does it mean to me? And I just go deeper and deeper and deeper into myself. Every time I can find a trigger, I go into, anytime I have a little anxiety or whatever, I go into that and say, what is happening? Why is this here? Because it shouldn't be here. There's a way for me to acknowledge this and release it, so it's not a normal part of my life anymore. And it's okay for it to be present, but it shouldn't always hurt, right? And so for me, it's just stopping myself whenever I feel a trigger and really looking at what's happening inside of me. What am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of that? What story have I told that makes myself afraid still, right? And again, it's a shift in mentality. And this is a big thing that I want people to understand. Like I said, fear and uncertainty are not the same. We are going to have uncertainty. We do not have to have fear. Fear is us seeing a negative situation and expecting a more negative outcome, right? But we can start to teach ourselves to look at our difficult situations and expect a positive outcome, a hopeful outcome, something that's even bigger than what we'd ever dreamed before. Like, we use our imagination to stir up all the things that could go wrong, but we never use our imagination to stir up all the things that could go right. And so really realizing, taking those trigger moments and saying, what am I afraid of right here? Okay, stop that story. How could it go the other way? How could this be something that could be for the good of myself and others? And that has been my PowerPoint the place where I found strength, the place where I found impact is stopping that pain cycle and reversing it and turning it around.
And instead of like, what's the worst thing that could happen through this? What's the best thing
Yes.
that could happen through this? Like, hey, I could live for another 30 years. Like that could be absolutely amazing. And, not Pollyannaing, but hey, this is the
It's
best
just,
possible outcome.
yeah, it's just as realistic as dying tomorrow. Like, we tell our stories about what's negative and we don't ever question whether it's like realistic or not. But if we ever try to tell ourselves a positive outcome, we're like, but is that realistic? Are people going to think, no, 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 no. Like, why not? Like, why shouldn't we be hopeful? Why shouldn't we imagine good things for ourselves and for others? But I just challenge you, test it out. See if your day isn't better. See if your life isn't better, your relationships, your choices aren't better if you're choosing a hopeful perspective rather than a fearful one.
I love that. All right, Lauren, where can people find you if people want more information, if they want to, reach out to you, if they're interested in your coaching? Like, what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on social media on Instagram at Lauren Huffmaster. We have a website for the nonprofit. It's adventuretherapyfoundation.org. But my book, there's a link to the book there. The book is on Amazon. And then the children's book is free. It's a sponsored book. So you can find that at expose-mbc, like metastatic breast cancer.com.
Okay. And we will put all of those definitely in the show notes. And I'm really looking forward to reading your book. This whole thing with emotions is right up my alley, and I absolutely love that. So the last question that I ask everybody is, if you were to meet someone who is just diagnosed with cancer or is in total overwhelm about everything that is going on, what is one piece of advice that you would give them to be able to help them through kind of those early stages?
For me, it's all about minimizing those side effects. So find someone who's in your stage of life, maybe not even your kind of cancer, but who's in your stage of life. So if you're a young mom, find a young mom. If you're retired, find someone who's retired, because cancer is going to show up in your life according to where you are in life. And let them, someone who has walked through this before, and let them just be your guide, because we all need somewhere to hang our hope. And if that person made it through, you can too. So find that person, hold on to them, ask your oncologist. A lot of people have asked their oncologist, and my oncologist has my permission to give my number out. And so I've had a lot of random people just call me through the years who just needed someone. So ask your oncologist to give you a referral and find someone who you can talk to as you walk through this process.
I love that. And that's, I ask everybody that question, and the most common answer that I get is have some kind of support team, support structure in place. Don't get into that isolationism. Make sure that you have people around you that can help you through that. But I love that as well. And I know there's organizations like Immerman Angels
Yep.
who will set you up with, a mentor who's kind of gone through the same thing that you have as well. Just somebody like my first interview was a woman named Jody, and she was diagnosed in 2000 with glioblastoma, brain cancer. And she was told there was 1% survival rate. And all she needed was one person who had survived it. And that was before Facebook. That was before like social media and stuff. And she found one person who had survived. And that was, that was all that she needed to keep going. And here's 25 years later, and she's, still cancer free. So just having at least one person, I absolutely love that.
That's a perfect example. Anchor your hope on that one person and like let it pull you forward.
Right. And there's no guarantee, but I interviewed someone else that said, that his chances of living 5 years was 1%. And his doctor said, but every single person's chances are 50-50. Like, you're either going to live or you're going to die, but it's 50-50. And he's like, that's what I hung my hat on. Not, oh my gosh, 1%, but hey, it's 50-50.
Yeah, I've doubled my lifespan, right? Doubled what they expected of me at the beginning. But I found someone who had lived 8 years at that time. And I said, if they can do it, then I can do it. And once I got that initial hump where they said I only had 5 or less, once I got past that into that 8 years, now it's just like sky's the limit. And things are changing every day. New medicines are out every day. Whether you love it or not, AI is going to change how quickly meds come out, and it's going to be so much faster. We have good times ahead. There's going to be good meds coming out all the time. So just remember that this is not yesterday's cancer. This is the cancer of tomorrow. And tomorrow's cancer is going to be a very different story.
And just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lauren. This was such an amazing conversation, and I so appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.